We're delighted to have you all here this morning. I know that we have hoped that we might be able to be a hybrid this morning, in person and online, but due to COVID numbers, we've made a decision to stay online and stay safe with everyone this morning. But we still hope that you have a cup of coffee or a hot cross bun or a piece of cheese or a dog liver treat if you're Quincy, you know, whatever your breakfast looks like. We're glad that we can share it together. So let's take a minute to bless Abba and praise God. Let's pray. Holy One of many names, we are so grateful that you've gathered us together this morning to breathe deep the inclusivity of your love, to open our arms widely to the graciousness of your hope, and to receive greatly the depth and the rootedness of the faith that inspires us, based in equity and diversity and inclusion. We ask, O Holy One, that you would bless the food that we have and feed all those who are hungry this morning. And we ask a special blessing for Abba this morning, that you would send your spirit to be with her so that she might inspire and inform all of us as your faithful disciples. Gather us in as one community of faith, hope, and love. We pray in the name of Jesus. And all God's people can say, Amen.
Amen. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Abba Mortley this morning. She's an award-winning engineer, an entrepreneur, a community leader, a PhD, a partner, and a mom.
That's right.
She moved from Trinidad and Tobago to Kingston as a student at Queen's and now calls Kingston her home. In 2013, she opened the first Share Mare. The first Share Mare Day Spa in downtown Kingston, and expanded to open a second location in 2018. So she's a practicing entrepreneur and speaks from experience on that topic. She is also chair of the Kingston Tourism Board and co-chair of the Queen's University Council on Anti-Racism and Equity. She's a member of the Economic Recovery Team and chair of a subcommittee for the underrepresented groups in the workplace. As an immigrant, she has seen the realities of Kingston's institutions through the lens of a Black woman. She lends her expertise to organizations in many ways, including through for consulting, speaking engagements, and participates in many panel discussions and speaks to groups like us. This morning, she will speak to us on, to me anyway, a relatively new but refreshing acronym, EDI, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I first heard about this with our Rotary Club in Kingston, and we have in our Rotary District established a whole EDI network to inform Rotary clubs throughout our district. So this morning, Abba is going to do the same for our church. We have many lessons to learn. Please welcome Dr. Abba Mortley.
Thank you for such a lovely blessing to begin with, Michelle, and thanks for such a nice introduction, Paul. I appreciate it. Morning, everybody. I feel like I don't have to do half my things I was already told, so you're good. And I feel like even in that prayer, there was so much inclusion. I was like, yes, you guys are on the way. Well done. It was great. Anyway, so thank you for inviting me and to allowing me to be here. And I've lived here in Kingston now for over 20 years, which seems a little crazy now. I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago and a part of a really big, close family, baptized Anglican and went to an all-girl Anglican school called Bishop Anstey High School. It's a really well-known school in Trinidad, and it was founded over 100 years ago by Bishop Henry Anstey, and it was done to give opportunities to people of color who were not at the time allowed to go to school or didn't have the means to do so. And so he founded this school, and it was a exhibition. So you had to write an exam to get in, but then it allowed you to go to school and be educated, similar to the elite persons of Trinidad. And so my great aunt, she was one of the first people who went to this school, and she just passed away in January, actually. And she started a trend of long line of Polarians, as we're called in our family. And they're known for their resilience, tenacity, drive, intelligence, fortitude, and community and moral compass. And in fact, right now, the first female president of Trinidad, the Honorable Paula Mae Weeks, she's a past student of this school. And I think my family in school and the culture in Trinidad, which is kind of a really all-inclusive celebratory, is like my first foray into EDII, you know, no matter what religion you are assigned or born into, we really celebrate everything. So we would light diyas for Diwali, we'd go, you know, partake in Holi, people will go do mass for Christmas, there's Shout Out Baptist Day. I think we have the second most holidays in the world. And I think that pride of community and culture kind of really enriches people because it gives a different understanding, and people are no longer so much an other or a thing because you understand what it is that they're doing when you participate in it. And I think, you know, today I was kind of asked to talk about EDI, which is equity, diversity, and inclusion. And really, in its plainest terms, and given the audience today, I think it's just a message like, you know, the same as Jesus was saying to everyone, you know, treat people like you want to be treated. At its essence, I think that is really all it is. It's nothing more complicated than that. But I think, you know, the challenge is that over the years, for whatever reasons, things have been indoctrinated into systems that makes it a little bit more difficult for some people other than others. And, you know, and that limits, you know, our growth. It limits the potential. It limits our community. It limits, you know, us as people and our personal growth. And I think it's a good sign that we're trying to have these conversations, or we're even having these conversations and recognizing that these things, you know, may happen. Sorry, I have 4 kids. So any now and then you may see 1 or 4 of them coming in. So just so as an FYI. And really, instead of EDI, I really like to look at DEI, which is really diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so the difference between that for me is because I know, don't shake your head, Paul, it's okay. So for me, EDI has to do with equality. So for me, sometimes it becomes very performative. It's like a ticky box. Like we need to have a woman. We need to have like someone from a BIPOC community. We need to have like an LGBTQ2TS. Like, and so it's more like a checklist. And it doesn't actually go into an action. It's just like, we have done this, so now we're equal. Well, we're actually not. We just have people there, you know, until we have everyone at the table and doing something. The equity portion is what is important, you know. And so for me, equity is like a doing verb. Like, what is the action that we can all do to like have a look and see what we're not doing or what we're missing to make sure that everyone really does have an equal seat at a table versus just having them at the table with no say. And so I think as part of that work, we have to realize that we all have biases. You know, it is what it is. So we have blind spots, we have unconscious bias, and those things are just a result of our brain's assessments of a situation based on our background, our personal experience, our cultural experience. And I think of like, you know, if you're a kid and someone gives you an ice cream cone and you see other people eating it and it looks really good, but you lick this ice cream cone, it's like wasabi ice cream. So it's really hot and like flamey. So then for the rest of your life, if you were to see an ice cream cone, you might think, well, I don't know about this ice cream cone. So right away, your fight or flight mechanism might think ice cream cone equals fire equals no. But we have so many ranges of ice cream that maybe if we just like check that and said, okay, well, maybe that was one experience and it might be different, we may realize that, oh, well, there's lots of different flavors, and that those flavors, just because of that one flavor, doesn't, you know, negate that I may not like it, you know. But I think just checking that and realizing that, okay, we may have something and it's okay because we all have it, but what can we then do to recognize it, or to like at least make an attempt to see if it's different from what we thought it was going to be, you know? And so I thought, if you'd indulge me, I'm going to do a little example as a little riddle. If you've done it before, don't answer. But if you haven't, no, just kidding. You can just answer. I think it's a small enough group that people can just say what they think it is. And it will be interesting to kind of hear different people's answers and why they gave it. So this is my riddle. Ready? I'm going to go with yes. Okay, so a father and his son are involved in a horrific car crash, and the man died at the scene. But when the child arrived at the hospital, while they go into the operating theater, the surgeon pulled away and said, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." Can you tell me what the surgeon's dilemma is? Oh, Michelle knows. She's going for it. Oh, so does Paul. What's happening? You can just answer. I think you have to unmute, but I can't hear anyone.
Yeah, just unmute yourself if you want to reply to the riddle.
I've seen it before, heard it
No,
before.
Paul, you're not allowed to
I'm not
answer.
saying.
So stay back.
Anyone who hasn't heard it before? I don't want to put anyone on the spot. All right. Okay. Florence, you said you heard it before. Before you say the answer, did you know the answer when it was said originally in your original?
Actually, I think I did.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
But
All right.
because of the mother that raised me.
Okay. And so Florence, you can tell us what the answer is and why.
I would encourage you to say the riddle again.
Sure. So I'll do it again. So a father and his son are involved in a horrific car crash, and a man died at the scene. But when the child arrived at the hospital and was rushed to the operating theater, the surgeon pulled away and said, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." Can anyone tell me what is the surgeon's dilemma?
Patty's figured it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a family with two dads. It's a gay couple.
Why do you think that?
Well, they can both be the father of this child.
Okay. All right. Anybody
Not
else?
the answer, huh?
No, good answer.
That's really interesting, Patty, because that highlights my personal bias, I guess. Because that didn't occur to me. Shame on me.
No shame. There's no shame. There's no shame on anyone. It's okay. We can have different answers. Anybody else has something different from Kathy? Who's not Florence or Paul? Anybody else can think? So if it's not another dad, what else could it be? Should I read it one more time? Okay, I'll do it one more time. A father and his son are involved in a horrific car crash, and the man died at the scene. But when the child arrived at the hospital and was rushed into the operating theater, the surgeon pulled away and said, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." Can anyone tell me what is the surgeon's dilemma? I think Annie is trying to work it out here. I can see the wheels going. Any guesses, Annie? Not to put you on the spot. What do you think?
Well, one answer could be that the father who was killed in the car crash had adopted the child, and, and that maybe the surgeon was a biological father.
Maybe. All right. Some good answers. All right, Miss Florence, why don't you tell us your answer?
The surgeon was the son's mother.
Oh, okay.
And so I think it demonstrates, but I think everybody had valid points. It could have been an adoptive parent. It could have been a partner who was also male identifying. So I think there isn't really, I feel like the answer isn't really the answer. It is a answer for sure. And so there's no wrong answer, but I think it just puts, that thought process again, because many people kept thinking that the surgeon was male or male identifying, and often people don't think that perhaps it could be a female, right? But it also could be all of those different options. But it's just an exercise to show where your thought process is and why it is that you may go to a particular thing. And then so why it is important perhaps to then just take to recognize that and be like, well, what other options could this be versus what I may automatically go to? And really that's the work of what EDI and equity and diversity is. And I think sometimes to have that conversation, you need to have people with those different experiences at the table so that they can give those different points of view. And I think when you do that, then that enriches the discussion and whatever it is that you're doing, because, you know, we all, you know, as humans, I think sometimes tend to, you know, do things or go to situations or rely on people who are very similar to us. You know, there's this other thing that we do sometimes called the trusted 10. So maybe we'll do it kind of quickly off the top of our head, and we'll do like the trusted 3. And it's really to think about 3 people in your life who are not related to you, who you feel comfortable confiding in. And, you know, what happens usually is that many people, that person is really kind of an image of themselves. They may have the same orientation in terms of what they identify as. They may be in the same age group. They may be of the same religious or non-religious or whatever that may be. And so it just shows that sometimes when we make decisions and we trust people, we often start to do things with people who are just like us instead of including people who may not be like us. And so it's just really about having that awareness of being like, okay, well, what if it was someone else? What would they think? And maybe we should bring someone else into that circle so that we can get that perspective, a broader perspective, so we can widen the lens a little bit so that we can expand the view. You know, we're not taking away from it. We're just saying like, here's a little bit more of an angle that maybe you didn't see. And so I thought maybe too, I just talk about like my experience and why it is that I think this is kind of important. And so from Trinidad, I came to Kingston, and most of my family went to McGill. And I went to Queens because I saw the brochures and I thought, well, this is a nice town. It looks like there's different people here. And that was my first mistake, not actually visiting. So when I came, it was very much a stark reality from what I thought, especially growing up in the Caribbean, right? And so I was like, what have I gotten myself into? And so there was a very much like a bit of you know, I always joke, like I didn't realize that I was Black until I came to Kingston, you know, and I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but it's what it is, the truth of what it is. And so I think it just made me look for community in a different space. So I worked in a restaurant downtown, and it was a Greek restaurant, so they became like my Greek family. And I volunteered at Youth Diversion so that I could then have that sense of community. And I've been volunteering at Youth Diversion for over 20 years now. I still do. And, you know, so that I could try to show that there was a broader spectrum to what I maybe was experiencing when I was there. Because just on the other side, I think it's often, you know, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself, and you don't want to be like, this town is this. You want to give the opportunity to see that just the same way that there are different points of views and there are different people who may treat you differently. And this is not necessarily the norm. It doesn't negate the fact that it's happening, but at least, you know, you get to experience it and experience other positive things. And that's where I met my partner, and we have 4 kids, and we now obviously live here. But I think I just want to make sure that while I'm here, that their experiences are a little bit different from mine. And so that's why, you know, I continue to volunteer at Queens and do things like with Black engineers, because I think sometimes I can only speak from my experience, you know, when we think of things, again, it's just from your perspective. So usually like university, the structure was built for people who were privileged, right? You know, and so even just making it to school sometimes is a challenge for a person of color. And then when you get there, there's just all these biases. Like I had profs in classes of 10, even if I sat at the front, will never ask me to answer a question, even if my hand is up. And the thing is, like, these things are happening. Or, you know, people would say racial slurs, but you felt like there was no avenue to really get any accountability. And so, and I mean, I think the thing, it's increasing. Like there's a lot of indigenous defamation happening in Queens, and there's a lot of Islamophobia, for example. And so, you know, Holi was just celebrated, and someone was spat on coming from a celebration by another student. So, I mean, these things are still happening in the community. And I think part of the challenge is like a lot of people don't know it's happening, but it is. And maybe it's in part because Kingston is kind of getting more diverse. So maybe there are more people who these things are happening to. So maybe in a sense, that's kind of a good thing that we are bringing in people. But on the other hand, it's kind of debilitating because we, you know, people want to feel safe where they're living as well, you know? And as this group and the community grows, there's angst about whether it's really kind of a safe place to be, you know? And so having these discussions and just letting people be aware is a good start. And then trying to put policies and just recognizing that we have to change the way that we do things and analyze things and invite people to do things is a way to keep moving forward. And so that's why I think, like, as I said, as was mentioned, I'm the chair of UK. Actually, I just finished my 3-year term there, but I also sit on the United Way EDI Roundtable, and I also sit on the Homeless Collective Impact Committee, because what has been shown is that there has been a lot of disparity, especially in COVID, for people who are unhoused and mental health and all of these things, And so really, we have the saying in Trinidad that you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if so, as a community, in order to continue to be stronger, we need to hear those weakest links and hear what their challenges are so that we could continue to grow in all aspects of this stuff. And I guess lastly, because I don't want to go, what time is it? 8:53, because I can talk forever. So I'm going to be mindful of that. Like I do own Shamir, and we have 2 locations, and we really try to do community. I feel like if we're part of the community, we're not just there for a transaction. We're there also to be a part of it. So we always, every month, try to do something that supports the community. So this month, for example, we give 2% of our sales back to the sexual assault center in Kingston. We've done things where we've gotten stuff for period poverty. So we encourage people to bring in any type of personal care item, and then we give them a discount off of their service. Or for like Pinktober, for example, we anybody who has pink nails or pink toes, we give a donation for each one of those to Breast Cancer Action Kingston. Or last year, for example, with Pride, we gave honorariums for all the speakers and writers fest, and we also were at the fair. And so I think we just want, we got a mural painted in our downtown spa by some like non-binary, indigenous, identifying people of color last year. And the words that they put on the spa is like, we want you to feel seen here. And I think that's what it is. People want to just be seen. They want to know that whatever you're doing includes them. And not only that you're just hearing them, they want to feel seen. They want to know that you're going to action it. And I think really at the end of the day, that's what I think this is all about and why it's important. Because when we see and we hear anybody, like on any level, whether it's economically, whether it's just for growth of a community, there's never a negative. It's always a positive. And so with that in mind, there's no like loss in trying to do that. So I'll end there and say thanks so much for having, this discussion and being open to like start a conversation, and happy to answer whatever questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. What a great start to our morning. We're going to open it up for questions. We have 22 people here with us this morning. And so I'll invite you to unmute yourself, and we'll open the floor for questions, comments, conversation. Go ahead, Paul.
Abba, I was laughing out loud, though I was muted, when you talked about DEI versus EDI, because I have been going back and forth for 4 months on this. Tell me, you elaborated on, but I think I missed the nub of it. You prefer DEI because of the action, the order of the action? Would you delve into that for me?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think not that I prefer DEI. I think if you can use either, it's just like you must be clear on what the scope of your intention is. I think just the wording. So with EDI has to do with equality. And so for me, like equality is a very kind of just, let's just do it so that we can say that we have something done. So let's equally make sure that we have a distribution of women, of whatever it may be, X, A, B, C, and D, right? So equality to me is just saying, let's have A, B, C, D, and E at the table. Whereas equity is an action. It's like, how can we make sure that we put things in place so that A, B, C, and D are contributing or feel heard or getting the same opportunities? There's a picture, I wonder if I can pull it up. I'll try. There's a picture now that I can share my screen, and it has that people often see, and it has like 3 little boys on it. So maybe if you can just picture it, and there's a fence. And in that picture, one is just someone standing so they can see over the fence. One has 2 boxes so he can see over the fence, and one has a box so that he can see over the fence. So that's kind of equality, like, okay, now we can kind of see over the fence. Whereas equity is just like taking the fence down. So now that everybody can see, there's an action that you do so that you don't have to like try to make it seem like they're all equal, but you're giving them equitable tools so that everybody can be part of the playing field. So it's just about, for me, I just feel like one is actioning. So, you know, I'll give an example in terms of work. Oh, there you go.
Well done.
There you go. And so, but I think too, thank you for that. That was quick. I think also too, I'll give an example in terms of like, when I was on the Kingston Economic Recovery team for this group, people sometimes put up job postings. And I think traditionally, for example, you know, there's a template that you would follow and you don't really realize what you were saying. So one of the things had to do with like a bus driver, for example, and it kept asking for a high school diploma. Okay, which seems fine. But the challenge with that is that most job postings now are algorithm. So anything that doesn't say high school diploma is filtered out. But there are lots of people who do alternatives to high school, which is equivalent. But they weren't getting seen because it was filtered out because of the algorithm. So when they changed it, so it also had like high school or equivalent type degrees, then the pool increased dramatically. And so now they had a bigger pool for what to fill in. And so that was an equitable move by looking and seeing what was the thing that was breaking it down. Or another example would be like, again, with a job posting, sometimes people would put need a driver's license. But if you're busing or walking or biking, why does one need a driver's license if your job doesn't require that you drive? So again, you know, it was just something that was kind of put there, but it was not necessary. So by removing that line, it increased again the pool and made people who don't have cars for whatever reason able to apply to that job and to get it. So that was doing something that made it was a change so that we can make equity for those people who didn't have cars. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Who has the next question for Abba this morning?
Diversity is a problem in Kingston, as you noted in your talk. Kingston seems to be out of the loop. For example, when we the diversity loop. For example, when we brought families from Vietnam, welcomed them. Our church at the time had a family that I gave away their daughter in marriage, for example, because her father was still in Vietnam. But they moved to Toronto. They left and moved to Toronto. That seemed to be their focus almost since they arrived, but they did stay for over a year. What is it in Kingston that we do not have a more diverse? I'll give another quick example. I taught at St. Lawrence College, and when I walked down the halls in Sheridan College in Toronto, I virtually couldn't understand a word that was being said around me. When I walked down ours, of course I did. But when somebody from Sheridan came to visit us and walked down our mall, they looked at me and said, I can understand everything they're saying. There's so much diversity in Toronto area versus Kingston area. What's happening?
Well, that's a loaded question, I guess. There's like I'll give a couple examples. All right, everyone here, put up your hand if you think you can, virtually or not, or you don't have to, if you can go somewhere if you want to get your hair cut. If you want to go get a haircut in Kingston, can you get, you know, are there lots of options? Like there's no place in Kingston I can go get my hair done. So I have to go to Toronto or Montreal, right? And yet everybody here put their hand up, you know,
yes.
Or, you know, if I want to get a particular spice or food that I want, you know, now there's kind of the new Indian store and they have a lot of it. But prior to that, like, again, there's nowhere to go, right? And so I think like these are basic necessities, like getting a haircut, you know, but having to drive to Toronto, that seems a bit crazy. And
Yeah.
so I think, I mean, and so that's just like on a personal, just needs level.
Yes.
And then
yeah.
I think like, I sit on some boards, for example, and I think there's just like a bit of a resist. I think sometimes people are fearful for what they're not really sure about. And, again, talking about bias or not, right? And so with that, they rather sometimes stick with what they know versus exploring the possibilities of what they may be, for whatever reason that may be. Maybe it's like they want to control a power, or they feel safety, or whatever that is. And I remember on one of the boards, people frankly said, like, we don't want you on this board. We didn't choose you. And then like try to have an interview. Whereas I felt like they would never have done that to somebody else, I mean, clearly, if I can get a PhD in something, I can sit on this board, And so I think,
especially engineering.
That's right. That's right. And so I think like, it's those types of things.
Bias.
Or like, someone, people saying that, hey, you're a monkey or something like that. That happens. Or even in schools, like I was just on a call and someone every day, so kids put banana peels in this kid's locker, or pull down his pants to see if there's a tail. Like these are the things that are happening in Kingston, and where they're learning this. They must be learning it from someone. So I think if we're not having those conversations that we are more similar than we are different, and that we should try, and that we are all human at an essence, and we should just treat people like that, then those things will happen. And I think there are people who are trying to implement it, and I think that's what's important, is that we start to put the structures in. So even if you don't believe it, at least there may be things in place that will kind of force that change upon things that are there already. So I guess that's where we're at, and so I think we just have to keep having these discussions. And I think everybody in all their different silos need to have these discussions so that it becomes kind of a ripple effect, and it becomes a norm versus an exception, and people sometimes give the excuse of Kingston, well, it's Kingston, this is Kingston and we're changing, so let's change Kingston, and don't be afraid to ask questions and to do those things, because it's important. If you want to support the community that's growing and becoming more diverse, then you also have to, accept that some things are going to have to change.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Kathy Bear, are you wanting to ask a question?
Oh, it was more just a comment. After working 30 years at Queen's, I can understand completely how you felt a little deceived by the flyers, because when I worked in the medical research area, we had one of the best students we've ever had in undergrad, and she said she got accepted to med school elsewhere, but she says, I'm not staying in Kingston. I don't want to be the token brown girl. And when I worked in an administrative position designing a website, we had some pictures. A photographer came around and took pictures of our teaching assistants and their students. And the one that went into the Queen's database for all the pictures was the one with the person of color as the teaching assistant. And she was on bookmarks, she was on posters. Every time you turn around, she was there, because Queen's was advertising, we're diverse. But when I was building a website and we had an international student page, I asked, because we had all these professional photos, I asked one of the only international grad student we had at the time if I could use her photo on that page. And she said, sure, I'd love to. She's from Algeria. And she, when the website was being reviewed before Queen's posted it, the people in the communications department said, well, I think you need to find a more, how did they word it? A more international student for your picture on your international student page. It was because she passes. And she said, passing for white in Kingston as a Black woman is the most interesting way to see the biases, because people don't realize I'm a Black woman because I pass for white. But that's exactly the kind of thing Queen's was doing, saying, oh, we're not all just white. Well, we really are, but we'll just show you the pictures of the folks who aren't white, which makes people feel that they won't be the only one in their class, right? Or ever have a Black professor. And the department I left is now just started a Black studies minor, right? It took decades of work for many, many people to get Black studies. Yeah, it's encouraging. It's getting there, yes. But really,
Yeah, and I would say, like, I would give, credit where credit is due. Like, Queen's is actually trying very hard to work to put in things. I think the challenge is retaining people and getting it there. Because, sorry, excuse me, excuse me. I think, students want, they want to see that diversity all the way through. And so even for myself, I think I could count on my hand how many Black engineers there were in my year, and many left and did go to other schools. And I did have some other friends who said, we were tired of trying to answer, like, where are you from? Where are you from? Actually, where are you from? And so I think but they are trying, there's like an Honorable Sinclair who's there now, they're really trying to implement policies, and, Principal Dean is really like, these are one of these things, they've made their declaration as to what they're going to do. And so I think as an institution, they are trying, even as a whole, on each individual side. Like Jane Philpott is doing great things with EDII in like the medical field. And so I think, and then in engineering, the dean, Deluzio, also very good and very good in advocating for these types of things. And so I think there is a change that is trying to happen, and I think they are intentionally doing so. And so I will give them that credit, because I think they are working really hard. I think part of the challenge is that Queens is not a silo. And so when they come to Queens, they have to also feel included in the community. And so sometimes that doesn't happen, like I know, for example, during the pandemic at the beginning, some people went to a restaurant, but a lot of people don't change their phone numbers. Your number is your number, And when they were doing ID and phone numbers, they had to they felt that they had to justify that they were not coming from Toronto and they lived in Kingston because their telephone number was the same. Whereas that scrutiny was necessarily afforded to other people, And so I think just, again, minding your biases and realizing that maybe we do have people with a 647 number who may be a prisoner fellow who lives in Kingston, And so just recruiting those people. And again, if they have families, and they can't cut their hair, for example, just simple basic needs like that, well, then it becomes a challenge. Like I have 4 kids, I cut my kids' hair. But, otherwise, but like every month we'd have to go somewhere to get a haircut. And again, like I was just part of a team. So we just got like an Ontario Skills Grant. It only took me about 18 years to get there. But it's coming. And so we just got this grant. And it's essentially, that's what the grant is for, to show the value that if you teach existing hairdressers how to deal with textured hair, that you can increase your capacity, because there are people in Kingston looking for it, and you would be able to increase your bottom line. So there is value in doing it. So yeah.
Sure.
Now you mentioned EDII. Is there a second I? Am I hearing that?
Yes.
It has to do with indigenous. So it depends on how you want to frame what it is that you're doing. So some people have a different indigenous, some people don't like the word indigeneity. So I think it just depends, and that's a discussion that you have with people in your community who may be represented by that community and what they feel most comfortable having.
Great, thank you.
As you can see on your screen, Dr. Abba, we have a particular flavor of homogeneity in our culture at Edith Rankin. And so there is a real need for us to do this work around equity and diversion and inclusion in terms of understanding our own story. And everyone's story is valued and valuable and important, but we also have work to do in terms of recognizing our own privilege and how accessible the world is to people who are from white culture, who are from educated culture, who are from middle class culture, who are from an economic culture that offers a level of comfort. And so we're so grateful for your vulnerability and storytelling and willingness to share both your wisdom and your success with us this morning. We're really grateful for that. And seeing your kiddos come through every now and again.
Kiddos, cats, husbands, I don't know.
One thing that I would like, just kind of as a parting word to hear from you, is that we as the church here are quite typical in other United churches, and there isn't a lot of diversity in terms of culture or language or expression, and so we are entering into what in the church we call the affirming process, which is an intention around equity, diversion, inclusion, and particular focus with the LGBTQ plus community. Is there wisdom that you can share of lenses that we should be doing this work through? Because we all, of course, have our own lens, but it's filled with unintentional bias. So can you help, as we intentionally do this work, share wisdom around the lens that we should be intentional to see through?
I think, I guess you would work as a group to kind of see who's missing at your table and who you'd like to be there. And then I think it's through that lens that you try to work, you know? So if you think like, I would like to see more of this, then I think that's somebody you need to bring in, even if it's like I don't know if churches have like working groups of people, but maybe that's something, you know, just going out in the community and saying like, you know, look, we recognize this, and like, you know, what can we do to bring some more communities so that, you know, what you need in order to feel included here, you know, and whether or not people come or not, at least it's now part of something that you're doing, you know. And I think that's the best way, is just having the people at the table that are missing and having those conversations, because they, you know, and being mindful that like for them, sometimes it might be traumatic or it's a lot of personal work. And so that's like emotionally very taxing. But if you get someone and people who are willing to say like, you know, this is why I don't do X, Y, or Z, or come to this fellowship, then it will give you at least some sort of perspectives that you can build upon, so that maybe one person will change a different ice cream cone, like in my example, and try to come and be there.
And I love that. And of course, we always need to be looking at who's at the table and conversely who is not. Would you have recommendation of places that we might go, rather than putting the onus on someone coming to us, but instead us being action forward to go? Where are places that we could go to be able to be part of these round table conversations?
That's a great question. So I actually am just working with the city, because in what year are we in? June 2020, I think council had put a motion forward to have two committees. One was to do internal work and one was to do external work. And the external work one is supposed to be community driven and hasn't quite gotten off its feet, but there are steps here recently to try to do those things. And so I think like tapping into, once that's there, and maybe if I am part of that selection committee, I'll be able to give you a direct link once it's formed, but looking out for those types of things so that you can say like, hey, we want to be here, we want to hear when you're meeting so that we could participate. Or even whenever, so for example, there's a multicultural arts festival that may be coming up, again, starting back this year, or last year, they did a lot of series of things for like the 2S LGBTQT. So maybe inserting yourself, saying like, hey, we want to be a part of it. Like there was a community fair. So maybe you could be like, I would like to be part of the community fair. So just getting out there and interacting with people and then letting them know that you're there, so that, you know, you just need one connection of one person, really, you know. So I think just showing up to the table at those different events if you can, so that people know that, you know, you want to be present in the community. I think just showing up, and then from that showing up, getting there, you know, I live downtown, so there's like the Skeleton Park Arts Festivals. They always have kind of booths and tables over the weekend. Maybe that's a good place, you know. So yeah, I think just kind of inserting yourself in some of these community events, or even if it's this year as an exploratory year, you just kind of have a committee of people who go around every time there's an event and see kind of what it is. And then for the following year, you make that contact with the person and you say like, maybe this is what you want to do. So maybe you have a rollout plan, like first year, investigate what there is, second year, see how we could infiltrate, and then kind of keep building up that way.
Infiltrate. I love it. Joyce and I have arrived here in Kingston during COVID, so everything is requiring exploratory, because nothing's been happening. We haven't been anywhere or done anything, but we look forward to those opportunities. But I want to thank you so very much for being with us and being our guest and our elder and our wisdom leader this morning. We are grateful for the information, but also to be able to build relationship with you and to start on a new journey with you. So thank you so much for sharing all that you have this morning. I think one of the highlights and the important pieces is as we learn new language and new acronyms, whether it's with the LGBTQ community or the EDI or the DEI, as long as we don't call it DIE, then we're all good. We're moving forward with new life and new hope and new opportunity.
Yeah.
And we really pray that we can continue to learn with you and from you, and are grateful for sharing your wisdom with us this morning. So let's collectively give our gratitude and thanks to Dr. Abba for this morning's
And
work.
thanks for having me.